We are reading Dragonfruit by Makiia Lucier, Chapter 8. He did know her. As the outrigger rose and fell among the waves, Sam took in 10 years of change. They had been scrawny children, all arms and legs and scraped knees. Her elbows had once been weapons, sharp enough to stab him in the ribs when he teased her, which was often. Long hair flying and bare feet swift as she raced across the sand and up the trees, exploring the beaches and jungles and caves with him by her side. Her hair was still long, but she was scrawny no longer. Instead, slender and tall, her head reaching his chin. Still, he knew her. Hannah? Her hands slipped from his. She nodded, eyes wary, clearly wondering what he would do, which was to say stupidly, "You didn't die." "I didn't." Sam sat down hard on the bench. It could be he just fell. They had searched for years and found nothing. He had thought her dead and had wept in secret where no one could see. It turned out he had not needed to. Hanali was alive and well, which meant the stories behind the dragon fruit were rooted in truth, not myth, not just fantastical tales for children. His smile flashed, sudden, delighted. It worked. An answering smile touched her lips. Yes. How? If the dragon fruit had worked once, it could again. He thought of his mother asleep in the royal pavilion, 10 years of slumber. Papa wrote it down. A satchel hung across her chest. She wrapped an arm around it. I have it all here. Papa, how could he have forgotten? Sam rose, the canoe rocking, as an old anger rolled over him. Where is your father? Her smile faded away. Gone, Sam. She meant dead. Sam could see it on her face. For him, the grief was unexpected and sharp. Sam's own father had been killed when he was a boy, struck down in battle, but two men had seen to it that Sam had not lacked a father's guidance. Lord Isco and Lord Arihi, Hanali's father. And still, remembering the man's many kindnesses, Sam could not bring himself to say he was sorry. The words would not come. Your mother? Hanali asked. Nothing's different. His words were gruff. In the distance, the anemone continued to flee the giant bat. Sam whistled softly and said, without raising his voice, That's enough for now. Come back. The conjured bat stopped abruptly. There was a faint splash as it scooped up the poor stingray from the deck and returned it to the sea. It waited in their direction, movements stiff like a puppet on a string. The anemone sailed on. Hanali asked, If nothing's different, how do you have your mother's marking? Sam understood why she asked. The last time Hanali had seen Fetu had been the day of the poisoning. Fetu would have been with his mother, her marking and hers alone. When she didn't wake, he came to me. He was on her arm one moment and then flew to mine. I tried to give him back, but he wouldn't go. For the span of an indrawn breath, Hanali looked startled. How old were you? 9. Not long after you'd gone. That's very young for a marking. Hanali's expression was troubled. It's never happened before, has it? No. It had been a shock to everyone. Markings did not hop from one owner to another, and they did not attach themselves to young children. We keep each other safe, Fatu and I, until we can get her back. Sam pulled the oar up and around. There was something about Hanali's voice. It was deeper than one expected for a female, and curious sounding. It no longer carried the distinctive lilt of one Tamarindi born. Hers was a voice of many islands, one that came from anywhere and nowhere, a wanderer's voice. Where had she been all this time? How are you here, Hanali? She looked past him to where a far-off figure stood on the beach, by Sam's discarded boots. Atop a cloak billowed behind him. I know I'm not welcome. That isn't what I said. I'm sorry. Hanali's words were quiet. I don't wish to cause trouble. I had nowhere else to go. Before Sam could answer, the conjured bat drew up beside the outrigger. Sam and Hanali craned their necks to see its face way up high. It tipped its head to one side and shook it, as though trying to dislodge something. Fetu came tumbling down out of an ear like a pebble, with no signs of spreading its wings and taking flight. Before he hit the water, Sam reached up and snatched him from the air, cupping the bat in his hands. Fetu shook himself, wings flapping, before hopping onto Sam's shoulder. The apparition waded on toward the beach, sinking with each step, until the top of its head disappeared beneath the waves. Hello, Fetu. Hanali came closer, smiling uncertainly. It's me, Hana. Fetu turned abruptly on Sam's shoulder, presenting his back to her. The worst sort of rejection. Hanali flinched at the insult, her eyes stinging with hurt. He doesn't mean it. Sam's hand went up instantly to comfort the bat. Hanali, it was hard for him when you left. He doesn't mean it. Sam could have been speaking for Fetu and for himself. To his dismay, Hanali's lips wobbled. No, stop. Don't cry. Hanali burst into tears. I didn't wish to go, you wretched bat. How could you think it? Fetu whimpered. He burrowed against Sam's neck, pressing frantically into skin. Fur and bone disappeared, transformed into a tattoo on Sam's neck. The marking opened its wide wings, spreading along Sam's cheek and shoulder, before it furled its wings and disappeared beneath his tunic. Even though he had returned to a marking, Sam could feel him trembling between his shoulder blades. Claws dug into Sam's skin. Sam hissed, Fetu, your claws! Hanali, sit down. She flopped onto the bench, weeping, both hands pressed over her face. Her shoulders shook. Helplessly, Sam looked down at the top of her head. There was nothing to be heard beyond the waves and her tears, tears that sounded and felt like they were long overdue. Sam took the other bench facing her. He knew his uncle was growing impatient. Sam left the oar at his feet, waiting, until eventually Fetu stopped trembling and Hanali had cried herself out. She dropped her hands, looking anywhere but at Sam, who asked, When did your father die? 10 years ago. Everything in Sam went still. What? 10, she repeated, her voice scratchy and exhausted. Not long after we left here. Sam had heard her, he just didn't understand. Where have you been living? Hanali lifted a shoulder. Many places. Everywhere. Who with? Lots of people sometimes. No one now. Her answers told him nothing. Sam looked past her toward deeper sea. A terrible suspicion began to form. He had been so distracted by her being here, he had not considered how she had come to be here. What were you doing on that ship? Hanali did not respond. Fetu came creeping out from Sam's tunic, a small head peeking over his shoulder. I had nowhere else to go. Sam's bad feeling grew worse. That is an Esperanzan Dragoner, Bragadin's ship. How do you know him? Does it matter? Hanali wiped her tears away with both fists. Sam's gaze dropped to her hands. With one swift movement, he stepped over the center ridge and crouched before her. He held out both hands. Let me see. She shook her head. Hanali, let me see. A single tear fell. She placed her hands in his, palm to palm. They were slender, long-fingered, smaller than his. Sam studied them under the light of the moon. He turned them over. White scars crisscrossed both sides, sliver upon sliver, one cut after another. Fetu hopped onto Sam's forearm for a closer look. A distressed chirping filled the quiet. Sam lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers. It took everything in him to keep his voice even. Dragon scale? Yes. Were you? You were in a workhouse? At her nod. Bragadins? A sniffle. They're all his. On Raka, at least. For how long? Sam willed her to say an hour or a day, a moment in time, but he braced himself for something worse, because these scars, they had not come to be overnight. 6 years, Hanali answered, and when Sam said nothing, because he could not speak, she added, He doesn't keep anyone past 14. Our hands get too big, less efficient. Sam sat on his heels, reeling. A memory came to him, one he had not thought of in years. His mother had given Hanali a ring for her 8th birthday, a simple gold band with a seashell carving. From that day forward, Hanali refused to take it off. Each time he saw her, she held it up to the light, admiring it. Don't expect me to call you lady now, he had told her, rolling his eyes, just because you're 8 and wearing fancy rings. Hanali had laughed. I do expect it. A bow, also. Samatitama. He had laughed too, and did as she asked, bowing extravagantly. Lady Hanali of Tamarand, descended from one of the island's founding families, a bloodline 600 years old, as old as his, and she had worked in a dragon factory for 6 years, the remainder of her childhood, with no one to protect her. Sam rose, hands falling away from hers. The rage started in his chest and spread from there. Once again, he looked out to deep sea. Hanali said, What are you doing? I'm going to sink that ship, Fetu. The lanterns. I'm going to sink that ship. Fetu, the lanterns. Fetu bared his fangs, flew off, anger in every beat of his wings. Hanali stumbled to her feet. You can't sink an Esperanzan Dragoner. Stop! Sam did not reply. Barely visible in the distance were lanterns swinging from poles. One torch went flying onto the deck. A fire appeared. For the second time that night, shouting emerged. It's not just Bragadin on that ship. I don't care. Sam, the anemone is protected. You can't burn it down without reason. You are reason, Hanali. No. Hanali grabbed both of his arms. I'm no one, and if you burn that ship, you put everyone here in danger. She dropped her hand, turned toward the Dragoner, and said, Fetu, come back. Sam could feel the bat hovering by a second lantern, uncertain. What had his uncle said? We are a small island with vulnerabilities. Esperanza was no friend to Tamarin, but neither was it an enemy, and the line between ally and foe was a line easily crossed. Fetu, he said, seething and resentful, come back. Fetu returned and landed on Sam's shoulder. Homily dashed away the last of her tears and said, I'm sorry I called you wretched. Fetu ducked his head and leaned against Sam's neck, but at least he didn't turn his back to her. It was all she was going to get for now. Sam took up the oar. His words were brusque. It's not a big fire. They'll live. Hanali returned to her bench. Sam slapped the oar into the sea, taking his anger out on wood and water. There was so much he wanted to ask her. 10 years' worth of questions. He rowed to shore, not knowing where to start or what to say, and so he said nothing at all. Chapter 9. What has just happened here? Lord Isco demanded as Sam pulled the outrigger out of the water. He barely spared a glance in Hanali's direction as she hopped from the canoe onto the sand. She was grateful, for it gave her time to find her bearings. Seeing Tamarind from afar had left her heart bruised, but standing at the shore with sand clinging to her sandals, her toes, the damp hem of her trousers, it was a different sort of hurt. 2 guards had joined Lord Isco on the beach. 1 male, 1 female, both young. They came forward to take the outrigger from Sam and drag it the rest of the way to the beach. When Sam did not answer, Lord Isco said, Samati, it's a private matter. Sam's response was curt and followed by a glance at the guards, both within earshot. Fetu perched quietly on his shoulder. Private, Lord Isco sputtered. He jabbed a finger at the fleeing ship. Scaring that Esperanzan is one thing. Setting fire to a foreign ship is no private matter. Have you lost your senses? It's my fault. Hanali had been standing partway behind Sam. She came around to stand beside him. I wasn't on the ship by choice. Prince Samathi was upset on my behalf. That checked Lord Isco's anger. A female islander, a foreign dragoner. It was a familiar story. I see, he said. Time had hardened him. Deep grooves bracketed his mouth and heavy lines framed his eyes. There was more gray than black in his hair. He wore a great tapa coat, which shielded his shark, for there was no sign of it. I'm distressed to hear it. Are you in need of a healer? I'm not, Lord Isco. Thank you. Something flickered in his eyes. Have we met? Uncle, Sam said. It's Hanali. The clouds passed overhead, and the moonlight was bright again. It was the Lord Protector's first good look at her. Hanali? The wind blew his coat behind him. He had worn a similar one on her 8th naming day, when he had presented her with a jade carving of a sea dragon. It had been small enough to carry in the palm of her hand. What had happened to it? Her father had brought so little with them. There had been no time. Sir, Hanali lowered her head briefly, a sign of respect. Lord Isco. The title tripped on her tongue. He had never been Lord Isco to her, only uncle, an honorific used to address any beloved male elder. Once upon a time, this man had loved her and her father. Lord Isco did not speak for the longest time. When he did, it was with great underlying emotion. Where is he? His question should not have hurt as much as it did. Not, I'm pleased you're alive, only, where is your treacherous father? Papa is dead. Papa is dead. Lord Isco flinched. No, I would have felt it. I would have known. He was my father. I felt it. The guards remained with the outrigger, eyes wide, not even pretending they did not listen. Lord Isco stalked away. He spun around and strode back, kicking up sand with his boots. How? Sam said, Uncle, when? 10 years ago, Hanali said. He left our inn on Raqqa. He was going to the harbor to meet a ship. There was a message he wished to have sent to you and to the queen. Here her voice faltered. He did not come back. They found him the next day. Someone had robbed him and left him in the water. There was a brief silence. 10 years, Lord Isco repeated. But where have you... Your hands, he said suddenly. Hanali folded her arms, hiding the scars from view. Not quickly enough. The look on Lord Isco's face told her he recognized the sort of scars they were. His marking came creeping out above the necklace, a shark's head, flat against the skin and far smaller than any living, breathing shark. Still terrifying, though, but it was not looking at her. The shark's eyes were on the anemone. It's late. Sam looked up, searching the cliff top. Another guard stood in his place. Sam raised a hand. The guard did the same. We can speak later. I'll bring Hanali back to the city. Grandmother will wish to see her. Take them with you, Lord Isco said, meaning the guards. Fine. The guards came forward. They wore the same green uniform as Sam and looked a similar age. His introductions were brief. The female guard was named Liko. She was lean and muscled. Straight hair fell to her waist, free from braids or ties. Her fellow guard went by the name Bayani. His features were wide and friendly, and his words made her think of the western part of the archipelago. He had grown up on Isle Garapan, she guessed, or somewhere very close to it. Sam brought two fingers to his lips and whistled, making Hanali jump. Behind them, from the depths of a night-black jungle, came the sound of animals galloping. Four candayos broke through the palms, coming from different directions. They shared an ancestry with the horses found in the Oversea Kingdom. They were of similar height and appearance. These animals, however, were not brown or black or white, but the pale green of sea glass. Their coats, hooves, eyes, and hair all green. Also their manes, which were thick and ropey, like seaweed strewn along the shoreline. One stopped in front of Hanali. She grabbed hold of the saddle, pausing when Lord Isco called her name. She turned to face him. You said your father wished to send a message. We never received it. What did it say? Lord Isco's features were drawn and his words subdued. He had just learned of her father's passing, she reminded herself. She had had 10 years to mourn. He wished to tell you the dragon fruit worked, that I was growing stronger, Hanali answered. He promised to find another for Princess Oleana. When he did, he would return home to face his punishment. He didn't find another. I have, Hanali almost said. But Lord Isco walked off toward the water's edge, and she swallowed her words. Sam brought his condayo over. He favored his mother. Hanali had seen the resemblance right away on the outrigger. His face was angle and sharpness, like the statues of his ancestors found throughout Tamarind. Tousled black waves covered his head, and his eyes were a deep brown, more serious than she remembered. A strong, handsome face. He's happy to see you, Sam said to her, meaning Lord Isco. Hanali surprised them both by smiling. Sam's mouth nudged into a smile of his own. It's true, or it will be soon. You're a shock, Hanali, but not an unwelcome one. He glanced at the sound catcher around her neck. You kept it. Hanali wrapped her fingers around the carving. Do you want it back? It was a gift, yours to keep. His head came up, questioning. It didn't work off island, did it? No. Well, it should, now that you're home. Sam patted his condayo. Ready? Hanali swung her onto her condayo and followed Sam and the guards into the jungle. She looked back once, but Lord Isco no longer stood on the shore. His cloak lay crumpled in the sand beside a pile of cockle shells. She saw a figure in the water, arm slicing through the waves, and the outline of a shark fin right beside him. The road from the shore to the city was paved in coral, crushed underfoot over the years. Hanali recognized it by sound, not sight, for there was no light to be had in this dense island forest, not even from the moon. They rode swiftly through the night. Hanali could hear the Kandayos breathing and the surrounding thrum of the jungle creatures. Bats hunting and pigs foraging, sand crickets everywhere. Most island cities were built near the water. Tamarind was no exception. The ride was a dark one, but swift. In no time at all, they left the jungle behind. The city gates rose up before them, a massive structure carved with images of Tamarind's founding mothers. Sam's ancestor stood proudly in the center. A leafy crown on her ancestor stood proudly, a leafy crown on her head. Hanali's ancestor was there on the left, her grandmother many times removed, wearing a long robe and a plumeria lay 4 strands wide. Here the torches blazed bright and clear, without odor, dragon oil. There were guards up high and guards down low, every one of them armed. Hanali lost count of the number of spears and machetes, daggers and clubs. You favor her, Sam remarked, looking at their foremothers. Hanali's voice wavered. Really? You don't see it? Is that you, Prince Samati? A guard called from a tower platform, an older guard with a bushy beard who carried a spear. Hanali knew him. His name was Nasi. It's me, Sam called back. Open up. The gates swung wide. The gates swung open. By the time Sam, Hanali, and the 2 guards nudged their condayos through, Nasi had descended the tower stairs and was there to meet them. He pulled Sam aside, speaking quietly. Sam leaned down from his condayo to hear. The words just came from the lagoon drifted her way, along with stolen and cousin. Sam returned to Hanali, his expression aggravated. There's something I have to see. It can't wait. Liko and Bayani will take you back to the pavilion. My pavilion? Hanali had not thought that a possibility. No, to mine, for now. Liko said, Prince Samati, what should we tell your auntie? Sam could not contain a grimace. Tell her I'll explain later, to Hanali. I wish there was a better homecoming for you than this, Lady Han- Hanaliarihi. However, you left us. However, you returned. Tamarind welcomes you home, to the land of your foremothers. He lowered his head so that his chin nearly touched his chest. The words were spoken for her benefit, and for those around her. Touched, Hanali lowered her head. A formal greeting required a formal response. I could not have wished for a better homecoming, Prince Samanthi Tamahanale. Thank you for your kindness and your welcome. They straightened and looked at one another, saying nothing. A choking sound came from Nasi the guard, who gaped first at Hanali and then at the carving of her ancestor. He had recognized her name. Hanali watched Sam ride off into the night. There's nothing for you on Tamarind, Hanali. Your family's dead. You're all alone. No one's coming for you. Captain Bragadin had been wrong. She was not alone. Someone had come for her.